Hey everyone, welcome to another episode of Founders Table. This podcast is focused on conversations with current founders to deconstruct their lessons and tactics in order to help you build your own startup. If you like this podcast, don't forget to rate and subscribe in your podcast app. This will keep you up to date on latest episodes, as well as help others find out about the show. My guest today is Amrutha Gujjar, founder of Structured, a startup focused on simplifying data integration and analytics for growth teams. Prior to Structured, Amrutha was an intern at Meta, Microsoft, and Google before deciding to join Meta full-time. She left Meta to found a startup because of the opportunities brought by AI and the desire to work directly with customers. In today's conversation, we talk about revenue operations, what it is, and why you should consider doing it, even if you're an early stage startup, white glove onboarding and doing things that don't scale, and using AI to automate the messy process of data integrations. Now, without any further ado, I give you Amrutha. Amrutha, happy to talk today. Welcome to Founders Table.
Thank you for having me, Kevin. Great to be here.
I want to start off by asking you a little bit about how you got to doing a startup. What were you doing before? And let's start there.
Absolutely. So before working on Structured, I was a software engineer at Meta. So there I was working on building building solutions for different operations teams for research scientists. And I really loved this experience of seeing who was using the things that I was building. And I found that very rewarding. And doing a startup seemed like a way to be very close to the user, which is something I've always really valued.
Got it. And as I understand it, you were working at Meta, but before that, you were, it seemed, an intern at Meta, Microsoft, as well as Google, like most of the big tech companies. I'm curious what that experience brought you, and if you noticed any differences or notable things between these big fan companies.
For sure. So I think working at a large company, it definitely taught me a lot about, building products that people use all over the world and really thinking about how to have an impact. But I think for me, the thing that I always really liked about building software was being able to move very quickly and have a a say in the direction of the product and operating from first principles. And so I think working at a big company, it definitely helped with things like setting the process up and learning about project management and the different cross-functional relationships that are important for building products. But I think with a startup you get to really own the entire life cycle of the business, and so that's been very exciting to learn about and transition into.
Got it. And normally it takes quite a lot. Well, depending on the person, but to make a jump from a very usually a generally comfortable FANG position to doing a startup. Why start a company? What made you take the leap?
Yeah, that's a great question. I think for me, I've always known that I've wanted to do something like this because my first experiences building software were building iPhone apps, and I absolutely loved being able to build for people and go through that experience of seeing that wave of mobile take over in the early 2010s. But at that point, I was so young that I was just in middle school. I couldn't really build a business around it at that age. And I think now with AI, it seems like the same kind of technological wave is happening again. And when there are these big platform shifts, there's a whole new set of opportunities to go after. And as someone who's always been really excited about building and finding solutions to problems, it just seemed like too exciting of a time to not be in the trenches.
Got it. So is that then, was it this shift in AI and everything that uh, made you decide now is the time to do a startup?
Yeah, absolutely. Yeah, it just seemed like there was an endless stream of exciting new businesses that are just waiting to be built.
Got it. Then um, tell us a little bit about Structured. What do you guys do? And yeah, like what problem are you solving?
Yeah, so structured helps growth teams like understand like their key like metrics more effectively. So we take data from like the sales, marketing, customer success functions and create a unified view that enables you to like calculate like, what is the acquisition cost for a new customer? What is the likelihood of a specific customer to churn? And we create like dashboards and reports and alerts for the go to market motion. So we really feel that like being able to have this like co-pilot that can like see across different functions and reduce these data silos, it can help increase the efficiency of the sales process, increase like customer lifetime value, and help like businesses like spend and allocate resources more effectively. So, it seemed like a very impactful space to build in.
Got it. And what made you decide to zero in on the ghost space, given, the space of all possible things you could have done? Why focus on growth?
Yeah, so I think like for me, it has a lot to do with I think my vision of what I think the future will live in looks like. So in the future, I believe that like there are going to be a lot of really small companies that are hyper effective at solving very specific problems, and they like should be able to match to their intended customer profile like much more easily. And so that means that we should be able to run growth in a very capital efficient way so that you can have smaller, leaner, more effective companies. And I think that like if we could do this well, like the surface area of problems that like people can solve is going to increase a lot because you can have, small pockets of hyper effective teams that can, like solve for their entire ICP without having to sink as many resources into growth. So I think that like this is a key way in which you increase like enterprise value. It's how you like drive like you get more value for consumers at much better cost.
Got it. And paint me the picture of kind of the before and after. Let's say there's a ghost team that isn't using Structured and doing it the traditional way, and what that might look like. And how does that change once Structured is in the picture?
Absolutely. So we've talked to several companies where as soon as they start trying to scale their sales and marketing efforts, the data becomes very intractable and unwranglable. And so that's usually a time in which, you'd go out and hire like perhaps like a data team, try to set up like a data warehouse and like hire a lot of like analysts and ops folks to like come in and like do this data consolidation work. This can be like a very expensive way to solve the problem. And I think with structured, like we realize that even if a lot of these tools exist, they're oftentimes not very accessible to like a business stakeholder. So we are building like with structured, it's a purpose-built like data warehouse, ETL tool, and like BI tool for revenue operations. So it's a fully managed service where a like an exec team or like a head of growth or head of sales can come in and very easily just connect into all of the different point solutions across all of their functions, and manage this warehouse with like at a higher level of abstraction where you can focus more on the like strategy and the outputs and less on the like data like operations piece to get to the same end result. So our onboarding times are a lot shorter, and like we are able to like solve this problem in a much more like turnkey way because of our focus on RevOps.
Got it. And what kind of customers are you currently focused on? What is your current customer profile uh, that is ideal for like using Structured today?
Yeah, so any company that has like early indications of product market fit, where like the focus is on acquiring new customers and like increasing revenue, like that, like any company in that boat would be like a good candidate for using structured. Typically, if you have like let's say like sales, marketing, customer success, and like product functions like built out in their separate teams, and it's hard to like understand the like unified picture. Like that is usually like a good indication that maybe like using structured would help solve that problem. We have like two different ICPs at the moment. Like one, we are building for startups because we did notice that like this people try to solve this problem when it becomes like an extreme hair on fire problem. And in reality, if there was a more frictionless way to get set up, there's no reason that anyone would ever be like too early to start investing in this sort of like data hygiene. And so we do have like a very lightweight version of the product that we serve to like other startups. But also if you're like mid-market enterprise and you're like growing very quickly, like um that's like a slightly different offering.
Got it. And how do those compare right now in terms of, I guess, either current customers, like size-wise? Is it like 90-10 in one direction, or is it more evenly split?
Yeah, so right now we've been focused a lot more on like the like startup persona.
Mhm. Got it. And for startups, I guess, how do you uh, essentially, because it sounds like it's one of those things where as a startup, you might not even realize it's a problem or something that you need, right? Like I think back to the early days of running my company, and we were just, you know, we already had too many things on the plate that we could do. And like in some sense, it's like, yes, I would love to kind of like track different touch points and understand the sales funnel. But in another sense, like we already have all these SaaS tools, and like how do you convince, I guess, founders that this is something that, you know, should be part of kind of like their toolkit?
It's a great question. I think that I have two answers for this. One, like, I think, for example, like for the engineers in the like audience, like, when you start a project, even if you're starting like a very, very small project, you're going to use like GitHub for doing like version control. And you could argue that like, hey, like, if you only have a few files, you probably don't need like GitHub to be able to make progress on your engineering project. But in reality, having the right tools, like it helps you like figure out like how to have a good workflow even if you're very, very small. And right now, like because adoption of the existing tools is so heavyweight and like large, like that's why like startups feel like this is not for them yet, when in reality there's like you're never really too early to think about like business health. And so we, by having like a really frictionless like onboarding and making it very easy to get started, I think like you can set up like good process around revenue operations from like really early on. And I think that's where like our product experience just makes it a lot easier to get started and start thinking along those lines. I think the second piece is largely like like what is the counterfactual? Like if you're not tracking these metrics, like it can actually be like you can get caught by surprise like more easily. Like we've like talked to some people who've like run businesses where they've been growing very, very fast, but then they're almost like sometimes surprised when they like run out of money despite having very good growth numbers. And it's because calculating like margin or calculating the most valuable customer segments, like because those calculations are not real time, it becomes actually like very, very easy to spend a lot of time on the like least profitable customer segments. It becomes possible to sink like marketing efforts into leads that are never going to convert. And in many ways, these are actually big risks for startups who have limited resources. And so, our value prop to startups is that understanding this concretely really early on, it can help focus that um, focus that energy towards things that are going to help sustain the business and grow the business, and do so in a very capital efficient way.
Got it. And we've been using a number of terms here. So initially we talked about ghost teams, and then also revenue ops. And I guess for folks that might not be in that space, like what is revenue ops, and kind of like what is their overlap with a ghost team?
Yeah, for sure. So revenue operations is a relatively new term. It was, I think, coined in like 2016, 2017 timeframe. But revenue operations is typically this function that sits horizontally across like all of the revenue generating functions of a business, like, including sales and marketing. So not every like company will always like have a revenue operations team, but somebody is doing this work within the business usually. And sometimes that can be like a head of growth, sometimes that can be like a sales leader that has like more of an operational focus. Even like in like startups, it's oftentimes the exec team, like the CEO, COO, that are doing this work. So, but the revenue operations function is largely this action of computing this business health metric, doing this like data consolidation effort, and helping to align a lot of these like growth functions towards like like a singular goal.
Got it. And usually, would that be part of, um, would they be part of the Ghost team, or would they be part of finance, or does it kind of like change depending on the organization?
Yeah, it definitely varies depending on the organization. Like sometimes RevOps will like report up into sales, sometimes into CRO functions, and uh, like those are the more common ones. But sometimes they'll also report to like a COO.
Got it. And one of the things you mentioned both previously in our conversation and also on your website is that you guys do real-time kind of analytics on that data. Why is it, what do you mean by real-time, and why is that important?
Yeah, for sure. So, by real time, what we mean is that you have live connections to, like, let's say your CRM or like your like Stripe, like billing data. The value of real time is, you can do like snapshot analysis even today by like exporting like CSVs and Excel sheets and, doing this like computation like in a one-off way. But the real value of structured really comes in when you see it as like, an observability platform for your growth team. And so being able to like pull the data on like a daily basis without having to reconfigure, like remap the columns from these different sources, like it allows you to like see like trend lines more easily. And like the it like doesn't mean real time in the way like I think sometimes engineers think about real time, and like this
You
like
don't have
second.
like a 100 millisecond latency SLA that goes through
Yeah,
the pipeline?
not quite that, but it's more like having these live connections really enable you to have a more continuous pulse on things. And also, a common challenge that we see is, sometimes the same metric might be calculated slightly differently, like day over day or by different people. And so, this, like, having like this real-time sync enables you to like have higher confidence in your metric, because you can kind of trace like how is this being computed, where is this data coming from. It acts as like almost a form of documentation for like across the team. Like you can share how what the inputs are that are going into a given metric, and like see how that might change like over time, like in a more consistent fashion. And I think like the real time also enables people to maintain like the good like habits around being rigorous around this.
Got it. And do you remember your first customer, and how did you acquire your first customer?
Yeah, for sure. So for us, like I think we were very lucky to go through the YC batch, because there's just like a lot of incredible like people within the community, and there's like a big culture of like wanting to like support each other. And I think that like with the early customers, you really want to have people that you can like partner up with and work very closely with, like especially when you have like an MVP that might not be like fully feature rich yet, like having like the strong like personal like interpersonal like relationship can matter a lot. And I think this is where being able to like talk with like our YC batchmates, understand their problems, and like kind of build alongside experiences that we heard about from them, like this was like a really big driver of like our early usage and early like conviction that this was a problem worth solving.
Got it. And what is it today? It's today in terms of customer acquisition. Is it still like other YC companies, or are you doing more outbound? But what does the customer acquisition process look like now?
Yeah, we have tried like several things at several different experiments. For us, like we are really big into like the building in public. So we do like monthly launch posts. We like engage a lot with like the RevOps community through like a Slack group that has like, a lot of experts in this space. We host a lot of in-person events and, for us, like I think like especially when you're early stage startup, you have to be like pretty scrappy in like what like early growth looks like. And so for us, like, I think being able to like build a community around the product and build a following around people who are interested in the progress we're making month over month, like that has largely been a big driver for us.
I think I also saw somewhere a New York Times Square post uh, for you guys as well.
Oh yeah, yeah.
Um, in terms of all the kind of like different channels you tried, is there any early indicator of what's been most effective, or have they been kind of all like similarly contributing?
Um, like in terms of like which part of the product is most effective?
In terms of customer acquisition, like, in terms of like building the community or like scoring events, I'm just curious if it's been clear if any given channel has been more effective than the others, or is it still too early to tell?
So I think for us, like more of the community-based approaches have been successful compared to things like outbound. Um, I'm a big believer that you should always do the like type of go-to-market motion that like feels good to you. And I think like with like a lot of outbound, especially email, like I know there's like a big push of everyone's like you got to send the cold email, you've got to do the cold messaging. I think like for me, I've always really liked the like lead with value, like try to figure out how can you provide value to someone even on a first interaction. And I think like sometimes doing like, like more community-based approaches, it's more possible to like find ways to like help people or give them insight that's valuable, that's not like a like pitching someone an email. And so I think for us like that has worked a lot better than like the outbound where I don't know. I personally like don't like that channel as much.
Yeah, makes sense. When I first started, we were definitely community focused, and then later on, it was well, different product kind of made the shift to B2B, which was more sales outbound, and it was a completely not 100% different, but it was very much a different muscle to kind of exercise. In terms of value to your customers, do you I guess what have your customers been saying? Like, what has seemed to provide the most value of structured for your current customers?
Yeah, so there are a couple of things. So, the number one thing that we hear is like, I think a lot of people have like intuition that they should have like a single source of truth for like their data, but the actual overhead of setting up the warehouse and setting up the connectors is like sometimes too heavyweight for people to like invest into if it's not easy to. And so I think the interface that we provide with Structured to be able to simplify that setup has, I think that's been received very, very well. I think the second piece is like easier BI tool that's more purpose built. Like, we have like templates, like query templates for common types of insights that RevOps is looking for. We have like pre-built like metrics for like common business health metrics, and you can edit these, you can tweak these, but out of the box you get quite a lot out of the box. And for customers who like are using more traditional BI tools or traditional data visualization tools where the lift is heavier to get to the same output, like I think they seem to appreciate the ease of use and the experience of having something that's really built for them versus built as like a more general purpose tool.
Got it. And we mentioned Copilot for DevOps, and I'm curious how that manifests. How do you take advantage of language models or AI to help customers in structured?
Yeah, absolutely. So we use AI specifically in that data mapping layer. So, for example, like if you had to onboard to a tool like Structured, like without like having AI enabled features, you would have to do a lot of work to manually map the columns and like understand the relationships like very, very rigorously across these different solutions. It becomes hard to like like deduplicate entries or understand these like infer these relationships between these different entities. And so with AI, like the onboarding time and the data mapping like effort is like really reduced. And this is where I think it's more possible to build like more flexible object models because you can make these like, you know, like like jumps that like a language model can make with like reasoning. And I think that's where the really exciting new capabilities emerge. Like even when we think about like for example like Salesforce or the last generation of like CRMs, a lot of the object models have been very rigid, very brittle, and a lot of businesses end up like like modeling their business after Salesforce instead of having Salesforce model their business. And I think
Mhm.
with like something like Structured, you can bring the data as it exists and like being able to infer the correct object model and being able to adapt to like let's say like a new GTM motion you're onboarding and like have that flexibility of like and not break all your reports. Like, I think that's something that we're really optimistic that AI is going to change. And I think we're like on the cutting edge of that.
Nice. And how well does that work today? I guess just thinking, well, just getting your thoughts on like everyone's working with language models today in the enterprise, and I think people are still trying to figure out, what is the best way of working with it, what kind of works, what is there today, or what might still be a few years out. In your experience with structured, what has been kind of effective at being able to leverage these models? And is there anything that where they're not quite there yet?
Yeah, so we like have like different tiers of like how like low steer or high steer we want the AI to be. So we have some product features like reports that are very AI driven, where like the like questions are also generated by AI, the queries are generated by AI, and there's like a several step process. I think like we find that like the fully autonomous workflows like that often require like a lot of refreshing and retrying and like it's hard to like I think it's mixed results on like how high quality things of that nature are. But I think the most exciting and I think useful things today are things where you can have like AI generated, human verified, and human validated. And we have like some product surfaces where we have you have the user ask the question, but then all the suggested questions are AI driven. And so this guided exploration is like a combination of like human input and AI input. And I think that like braiding those two things together, I think tends to work a lot better for now. But I definitely think moving forward, having more autonomous exploration is going to be more possible. But I don't think we're quite there on that yet.
Got it. And what do you think it'll take to get there? Is it just these models getting more capable? Is it that they get cheaper, that they get faster, a combination of all of this?
I don't know if it's even like the model cost that's the bottleneck at this point. Um, I think it's largely like context, like lack of context and like understanding of like the user intent. I think that those are like the big things. Like it's one thing to like let's say just generate like a follow-up question during like for a query, but I think to understand like the business context of hey, this person is in this role and like this is why they're doing this analysis and like these are the things that people in this role would care about and like almost inferring that job to be done and like having context around the business, having context around the person using it. I think those are things that can help improve performance of the model. And there's some ways that you can do this with like just prompting and like including better prompts. And like we're experimenting with that, but there are limitations that start to emerge.
Got it. Yeah, it's a lot more about not necessarily just like the explicit kind of data that you feed it, but more the implicit, the business goals, the people, the, what are their motivations? What is the business's kind of current context and whatnot?
Exactly.
And I guess speaking of people, so as I understand, you have co-founder one, or you're not doing this by yourself. And I'm curious how uh, like your goals and responsibilities are divided between you and your co-founder.
Absolutely. My co-founder Shivam and I, we were colleagues at Meta, and before that, classmates at the University of Washington, where we were both studying CS. I think like for us, like we're lucky that we are both like technical and from engineering backgrounds, and so I think like especially when you're very early on, like I think that the two core functions of like building product and like marketing your product by like selling it, like these two functions are very tied together. Like as the earlier on you are in a business, and I think for us, our roles and responsibilities at this point are like somewhat fluid. Like, we're both like, like have a big say in like the product direction and like, like the execution on that front. Like I think Shivam has been more focused on like, like managing the engineers and like making decisions about like, what infrastructure we want to build on, like which kind of warehouses do we want to support, like he's been like amazing at making a lot of those like core engineering decisions. I've been like trying to leverage like the capabilities that are emerging from the product that we're building and like matching that with the customer problems that we're hearing and like like making sure we're communicating value effectively, understanding user problems well, and like tying that to like our thesis about what the product should do and what we need to build. So, the product and marketing functions right now are very tied together. So I do think like our roles are, yeah, they're harmonious.
Got it. Yeah, it sounds like you got a nice split between engineering. Well, I mean, I'm sure there's lots of overlap, but primarily engineering and primary more on the customer outreach side. Um, but speaking of like communicating value, I'm sure like, this is not something I don't imagine like you've had, like an initial like pitch and that's been like amazing since day one. But I'm curious like how your kind of like pitch has evolved over time and what you've found either to be the most effective right now or like what kind of lessons or signals do you kind of look for when you talk to customers that have helped you kind of refine that pitch?
For sure. So I think for us, like when we talk to customers, I think the number one thing we want to do is understand like if they have the need to begin with. And so I think validating that upfront has helped us like understand like the language that the customers speak in more effectively. And I think like when we first started out, I think we didn't have as good of like a pulse on the standard terminology and the standard concerns and worries that this like customer segment would have. And so the main evolution of the pitch has been to really dive deep on the user discovery and customer discovery side and invest very heavily into that. And then we can, like I think communicate in a way that resonates more deeply with the user. And That's been a big change. I also think like for us we had this like hypothesis going into building this company that there was like value in unifying data and finding data that lives like in silos in between different tools. Like we had like a general intuition about it, but I think like actually diving deep into the space, like it's exposed to us like the exact like business value, like the ROI of using like tools. And so I think we can speak more concretely about how this kind of measurement can increase revenue and decrease like revenue leaks. And I think the pitch feels more concrete than it was when we first started.
Kind of, yeah, it's a constant. The more you do it, the kind of more facts you have to deal with, and stuff like the industry terminology and whatnot is something you'll just like work into your own pitch and vocab.
For sure.
Um, So, what are your current priorities? Are there any, or being backing up for that, like what is kind of like your planning process? How do you decide what to work on?
Yeah, so we actually do like a road mapping process every couple of months or so. We're actually in the process of doing this right now. I think it helps us like sequence like how we build the product because you can't build something as complex as we're building like from day one. And so right now we're putting together like some of the projects we want to focus on based on things we're hearing from customers. One thing we've been hearing a lot this quarter is that um, people want like an audit log on like a per entity level. So if you have like let's say one account, like I don't just want to see the snapshot of like, what the state of this account is, but rather, what are all the tickets associated with it? Who are all the sales reps that have talked to this account? Like how long did the sales process take? Like have like an audit log, like on a time basis of, like that can tell the full like 360 picture. So that's a common question that we've gotten asked, and like, that like focusing on building that out, I think is going to really help our existing users as well as like future prospective customers. So that's been a big focus. And yeah, like oftentimes it's largely like based on feedback that has trickled down to us.
Got it. And right now, how do you make money?
Yeah, so we are a subscription business. Like typically we have like annual contracts. We can do month to month as well, but typically we'll have like annual contracts.
Got it. And I think one of the things as I see a lot of AI first companies struggling with is kind of that pricing model. Because I think it varies, but the most common is definitely kind of what you just said of kind of having like a monthly subscription, or it is also like the consumption based, where it's however many queries you run. Um, I guess, if you're doing like a monthly subscription, but like underneath, I am assuming you're probably paying more on like a consumption basis to either to one of the big like foundation model companies. How do you, I guess, kind of just like control or like limit the blast radius if like a customer just starts um, going off the rails or just, going down the worst path in terms of consumption on your side?
Yeah, for sure. Like definitely like in our like sales agreements, we have like some limits on like the like volume just to make sure that it doesn't get like that out of control. But and I do think like I want to experiment with having more of like a monthly active rows based pricing model as opposed to more of like a standard like fixed subscription model. But at this point, like I think it's easier to like bucket users based on different tiers and like usage tiers and like excuse me,
Bless you.
have like more of like a fixed price for each tier. Just I think during in the stage that we're in right now, just because it really simplifies even like our own segmentation of like our market. And I think introducing more nuance on pricing, like probably like later on, will definitely be a priority in the future.
Yeah, makes sense. One of the YC mantras, there are so many, but doing things that don't scale, and it's kind of like doing things at your current stage. But are there any things that you're currently doing that fall into the things that don't scale bucket?
I think a lot of I think a lot of how we view like customer success is very heavily in the do things that don't scale mentality. Like for us, like we want to make sure that anyone that we work with is going to be successful like using the product, and we're not going to sell a product if we don't have high confidence that it's actually going to solve the problem for somebody. And I think we're very transparent about that. And sometimes it's a bit counterintuitive, but I think that is the way to think actually grow the business, like have people be successful. So we do a very very white glove like onboarding sessions. We've also done like consultative sessions to help like businesses like generally understand their revenue architecture and like how to structure their data and like what kinds of tools to invest in. Like we like help like provide a lot of support even outside of the scope of our immediate product. So these are all ways in which we are able to do things that don't scale by like, like really investing heavily into like these partnerships.
Yeah, you want to align the value proposition, like make sure like you win if your customers win. And
Exactly. Yeah.
uh, one thing that you mentioned about you and your co-founder, you both went to the University of Washington and then worked at Meta before doing the startup. I guess looking back at that time, is there anything for either college or Meta that you think uh, helped you, uh, like significantly helped you in your current role as startup founders? Or, uh, is there anything that you wish you did more of that, could have put you in a better position? And asking this in the context of, if some of the listeners are currently in college or at or one of these startup big tech companies and thinking of doing a startup, things that they might invest in now so that they can uh, be effective as founders when they choose to do that journey.
Yeah, that's a great question. I think the biggest thing that I would have invested in more is like thinking more holistically about the problems that I was working on. Because I was in an engineering role previously, and even like, I think like Meta has like very cross-functional teams and like very product engineering focused teams. But that being said, though, when you're in like an engineering role, like you're not thinking about you're not thinking about like the sales and marketing, you're not thinking about like who the end user might be for a product. You might already have a charter to work with like another team, and like the ambiguity gets like constrained by like people that are not you, and so it becomes problems feel more tractable when a lot of that is done for you. So I think like I would encourage people who are at these like big companies to like think more about like, okay, like if I like had to build, like how would I go about finding this ICP? How would I go about discovering the problems, creating scope, like think beyond like just what is given to you, and like think more about like what are organizational problems, and communicate about those things in a concrete enough way where you can understand like what is the dollar value the company will either make or save if I like do this project for this person, and like being able to identify that opportunity and operate in that really high ambiguity environment. I think like that's something where you're not going to be handed that like opportunity. You have to kind of go out and like search for it and like just do it, and it can be hard to know where to start, but I think like pushing yourself to do that, I think, can really help with that transition to a startup where you're forced to do that.
Absolutely. And I would also like to add that, even if you never want to do a startup, it is just something that is helpful for your career. Because at the end of the day, especially as you become more senior, one of the things you're generally evaluated at is not how many lines of code are you putting out, or even did you do good engineering, but, is your effort impactful to the business? And so thinking of the business holistically, especially early on, can really help you uh, make you stand out in the company, uh, as well as startup or anything else I would say that you choose to do.
Exactly.
All right, well, we are getting close to the end of the show now, and I generally close off with a common set of closing questions to ask my guests. And the first one kind of overlaps with the last question, but it's more general, which is, what advice would you give founders that are starting off today?
Yeah, for sure. So I think the biggest advice for founders is always like don't give up. Like I think the journey is always very long, and even for us like there was I think a very long iteration period where we didn't where both the product and the market were not entirely fixed, and the problems that we were trying to tackle felt intractable. And I think like tackling that scenario like one problem at a time and sort of chip away at it like over a long period of time, I think that's like a very like crucial part of the experience. And so if things don't click like right away, like don't give up.
Never give up. Uh, just do it. Yes. Next, when you think of success, who comes to mind?
For me, it's always been like learning and like personal growth. I think for me, I don't like being like stagnant. Like I think if like almost in a kind of masochistic way. Like if I'm like, like learning is painful and growth is painful, but I think forcing yourself to do it is, I think, the most rewarding thing, even when it's hard.
Yes, it is. So after you've done a lot of these hard things, um, how do you recharge? How do you unwind?
Yeah, I think for me, like, spending time with friends and family and like having a good community support network, like I think that's like what it's all about at the end of the day.
When you spend time with friends and family, is there any particular activity you tend to do, or like meet out for food, or does it just vary?
I think it definitely varies. Like, I'm not a big hobby person generally. I think I'm like too obsessive of a person to like really do anything too recreationally. I think mostly like just unwinding and talking, like relaxing.
Have you made any recent small investments in the last year that has had an outsized impact?
Like investments in like other companies or
These can be investments in either time or money, but anything that you've put uh, time or money in that has had an outsized impact on your life.
I think like for me like this is a more of a time investment, but I've actually been spending a lot of time um like learning from like the Lenny podcast actually, like if you've heard of that, like they're actually very
Absolutely.
long.
That's
Yeah.
He's one of my favorites. One of the inspirations of the show, actually. So
Yeah.
definitely plus one there.
Yeah, like he has like I think very long form content and like a lot of really great guests and like a lot of them have been so inspiring, and so I think I've been like honestly just like learning from like the early experiences of other companies and other people that I really admire, and sometimes like I think like one off it's like validating when like they talk about a problem that we've also experienced and like okay, this is normal, like this is fine, like that feels good, but also I think that like there are a lot of really smart people in the valley that have like experienced the same things and made the same mistakes, and you don't have to make every mistake to learn from things. And so I think investing in like learning some of the mechanics of running a company from the just wealth of resources that are out there, I think that has definitely had an outsized impact.
Yeah, for sure. You are not alone. I like Charlie Munger. One of his quotes, he was famous on not necessarily giving you advice on what you should do, but giving you the counter of giving you bad advice, essentially.
Yeah.
And one of his is, if you want to get far in life, then never learn from anybody else. Make sure that you only make mistakes, um, only learn from your own mistakes, never learn from other people. And that stuck with me as, you used to do the opposite. Um, all right. And final question. Do you ask an offer? Is there anything you would like to request from my audience or any sort of offers that you would like to make before we close out the show?
Absolutely. So every quarter we open up a few spots for like like design partnerships and beta customers that get early access to some of the things that we're building. So if any of the things I talked about are interesting and you want to have a front row seat, we're happy to like partner with you, and yeah, please feel free to reach out.
All right. Sounds good. And we'll have links to contact information as well as everything we talked about in the show notes.
Sounds great. Thank you so much,
Yeah.
Kevin. This is a
Yeah.
really fun podcast. Thank you.
Thank you. I had a lot of fun. So thank you for coming on and with that.
Take care.
Hey, just one more thing before you go. Thanks for listening to this episode of Founders Table. If you like the show, please subscribe in Apple Podcasts, Spotify, or wherever you get your podcasts. Also consider giving us a rating as it helps others find the podcast. You can find all episodes as well as more information about the show at founderstable.co. Until next time, stay hungry.